It has been over a year now since the whole world changed. Businesses closed, travel restricted, and people around the world took their precautions as they faced the COVID-19 pandemic. But now, with the various vaccines that have been produced, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and life will, in Allah's will, soon return to normal. Ever since the start of the pandemic, the World Health Organization, along with scientists and health institutions, have worked together to produce a COVID-19 vaccine. The state of Kuwait joined this effort by donating $75 million to the WHO in order to provide the necessary assistance for the organization's campaign to develop, produce, and distribute COVID-19 vaccines. Kuwait's support to the WHO was recently praised by the WHO Regional Director Dr. Ahmed Al-Mandari, who revealed that Kuwait was one of the first nations to support the organization's campaign. In regards to the efficiency of the vaccines in combating the spread of COVID-19, Dr. Al-Mandari affirmed that vaccines are an important tool to fend off COVID-19, saying that the WHO is keen on ensuring the safety and efficacy of the vaccines to bring a sense of normalcy back and revive world economy. The United Kingdom became the first country to begin their vaccination campaigns on December 8, 2020, with 91-year-old grandmother Margaret Keenan becoming the first person in the world to be given the Pfizer COVID-19 jab as part of a mass vaccination program. UK Health Secretary Matt Hancock hailed the beginning of UK's vaccination campaign, saying that it was a tribute to scientific research and human ingenuity and to the hard work of so many people. Prime Minister Boris Johnson visited several hospitals in London to see some of the first people getting the jab, telling those getting vaccinated that this is good for them and for the whole country. In England, the vaccine is being offered to some hospitals and pharmacies, at local vaccination centres and at larger vaccination centres. Existing COVID vaccines already in use, such as the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine and the Pfizer-BioNTech one, were developed at incredible speed. The process took around 10 months instead of a decade in normal times, making small and relatively simple tweaks to these vaccines to make them a better match for new variants should happen even more quickly. Current vaccines were designed around earlier versions of coronavirus, but scientists believe they should still offer some protection against the new variants being seen now. The UK government has already announced a deal with biopharmaceutical company CureVac to develop vaccines against future variants with a pre-order of 50 million doses. In the United States, the country's largest vaccination campaign ever began on December 14, 2020, with the campaign aiming to reach 100 million people by April, as the country worst hit by the pandemic tries to overcome the spread of the deadly virus. The vaccine rollout came as the pandemic continues to ravage the country. Deaths have been rising sharply since November, and the number of people in hospitals with the virus has also continued to grow steadily. The Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, a collaboration between a U.S. pharmaceutical giant and a German biotechnology company, offers up to 95% protection and is the first COVID-19 vaccine to be approved by U.S. regulators. The first 3 million doses in the U.S. are being distributed to dozens of locations across all 50 states by cargo, plane, and truck, because the vaccine has to be kept at extremely low temperatures and the vials are stored in dry ice-cooled packages as they are transported around the country. GPS-enabled thermal sensors are also being used to track the temperature of shipments as they are delivered. The vaccine rollout in the U.S. is seen as a key symbolic turning point in the country's battle against the pandemic, with hopes that a high number of people will get vaccinated.
Pfizer and BioNTech announced that they were ready to immediately ship initial doses of the vaccine to the 27 EU member states. The companies said vaccine doses for Europe will be produced in BioNTech's manufacturing sites in Germany and Pfizer's manufacturing site in Perth, Belgium. The vaccines must be kept in ultra-cold temperature, required iced boxes for shipment. Preparations for the vaccine rollout come as the identification of a highly infectious new strain of the coronavirus in Britain caused chaos across the region, with countries shutting off travel ties with the United Kingdom and disrupting trade ahead of the Christmas holiday. The European Medicine Agency, EMA, said it was highly likely the vaccine would work against the new variant of the coronavirus. However, EMA Executive Director Emmer Cook said it would take a long time to inoculate the 450 million people of the 27 EU countries. EU countries including Germany, France, Austria, and Italy have said they plan to start vaccinations from December 27th, as Europe tries to catch up with the United States and Britain, where inoculations began earlier in the month. More recently, Britain launched a trial to assess the immune responses generated if doses of the COVID-19 vaccines from Pfizer and AstraZeneca are combined in a two-shot schedule. The British researchers behind the trial said data on vaccinating people with the two different types of coronavirus vaccines could help understanding of whether shots can be rolled out with greater flexibility around the world. Initial data on immune responses is expected to be generated around June. The trial will examine the immune responses of an initial dose of Pfizer vaccine, followed by a booster of AstraZeneca's, as well as vice versa, with intervals of 4 and 12 weeks. Matthew Snape, an Oxford vaccinologist who is leading the trial, said initial results could inform vaccine deployment in the second half of the year. The researchers said that the recruitment for the study starts with over 800 participants.
On December 27, 2020, healthcare workers and the elderly across the European Union rolled up their sleeves to receive the first doses of the COVID-19 vaccine in a symbolic show of unity and moment of hope for a continent confronting its worst healthcare crisis in a century. The coordinated vaccine rollout for the 27-nation bloc was aimed at projecting a unified message that the vaccine is safe and Europe's best chance to emerge from the pandemic and the economic devastation caused by months of lockdown. For healthcare workers who have been battling the virus on the front lines, the vaccines represent an emotional relief as well as a chance to urge Europe's 450 million people to get the shots for their own safety and for those around them. Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz called the vaccine, which was developed in record time, a game changer. Head of the European Union's Executive Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, stated that the additional vaccines in development, the EU will have more shots than necessary and could share its surplus with the Western Balkans and Africa altogether. The EU's 27 nations have recorded at least 37 million COVID-19 cases. Many European politicians stood in line to receive the shots first in order to build confidence among the public that the vaccines are safe. Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis, after getting his shot, declared the start of the vaccination campaign a great day for science and the European Union. When countries first began their vaccination campaigns, there was worry within the WHO that poorer countries would not have suitable access to the vaccines as opposed to rich developed countries. But through the COVAX scheme put in place by the World Health Organization for the benefit of poorer nations, many African nations have begun inoculating the population, with several others now awaiting large shipments of the vaccine. Nigeria started its COVID-19 vaccination campaign after it received a total of 3.94 million doses of AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine. Out of the 10 million vaccines that have been delivered globally under COVAX, Nigeria has received 4 million. Meanwhile, both Mali and Rwanda received their shipments of the COVID-19 vaccine through the COVAX scheme, with Rwanda now aiming to vaccinate 30% of its population by the end of 2021 and 60% by the end of 2022. as the WHO and partners work together to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic response, they are also racing to develop and distribute safe and effective vaccines. Vaccines save millions of lives each year. They work by training and preparing the body's natural defenses, the immune system, to recognize and fight off the viruses and bacteria they target. After vaccination, if the body is later exposed to those disease-causing germs, the body is immediately ready to destroy them, preventing illness. As of February 18th, at least 7 different vaccines across 3 platforms have been rolled out in countries around the world. At the same time, more than 200 additional vaccine candidates are in development, of which more than 60 are in clinical development. COVAX, which the WHO launched with partners in 2020, aims to end the severe phase of the COVID-19 pandemic by speeding up the development of safe and effective vaccines against COVID-19, and by working with governments and manufacturers to ensure fair and equitable allocation of the vaccines for all countries, the only global initiative to do so. Vaccines are a critical new tool in the battle against COVID-19, and it is hugely encouraging to see so many vaccines proving successful and going into development. Working as quickly as they can, scientists from across the world are collaborating and innovating to bring us tests, treatments, and vaccines that will collectively save lives and end this pandemic. Safety and effective vaccine will be a game changer, but for the foreseeable future, we must continue wearing masks, physically distancing, and avoiding crowds. The ACT accelerator was set up to contain the COVID-19 pandemic faster and more efficiently by ensuring that successful diagnostics, vaccines, and treatments are shared equitably across all countries. Equitable distribution is particularly important in the area of vaccines, which, if used correctly and equitably, could help to stop the acute phase of the pandemic and allow the rebuilding of our societies and economies. The current COVID-19 pandemic is unprecedented, but the global response draws on the lessons learned from other disease outbreaks over the past several decades.
The U.S. government recently authorized Johnson & Johnson's single-dose COVID-19 vaccine, making it third to be available in the country, following ones from Pfizer-BioNTech and Moderna. Both of those vaccines require 2 doses and need to be shipped frozen. The J&J vaccine can be shipped and stored at normal refrigerated temperatures. Both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines showed higher efficiency in trials that used 2 doses versus J&J single-shot vaccine. The top U.S. infectious disease official, Dr. Anthony Fauci, said that he would take the newly approved Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine, as he encouraged Americans to accept any of the 3 approved shots. Fauci said studies are now underway to determine their effectiveness and safety for children under 18, who are less likely to get sick from the virus. Fauci said that elementary school students could get doses toward the end of the year or the beginning of next year, while high school students could get it in the fall. The new vaccine gives the U.S. government another option as it tries to immunize as many Americans as quickly as possible. According to the government data, about 14% of Americans have received at least 1 dose so far. Last month, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson unveiled his plan for a gradual easing for the coronavirus restrictions in the UK, stressing that his government's forecasts rested on the continued effectiveness of the UK's vaccine rollout. England's coronavirus vaccine campaign is significantly reducing cases of COVID-19, with a drop of around 70% in infections among healthcare workers who have had a first dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech shot. Preliminary study findings from Scotland also showed the vaccination drive there is working, markedly reducing the risk of hospitalization for COVID-19. In a new briefing alongside his top advisors on the COVID-19 pandemic, Prime Minister Johnson said that Britain has sufficient vaccine supplies to meet its goal of providing a first dose to all adults by the end of July. While the government's plan foresees a 4-step easing of lockdown restrictions that could see them removed entirely by June 21st, at the earliest, its chief scientific advisor Patrick Vallance said masks may be continued to be worn next winter, to prevent any surge in infections.
On January 30th, 2020, following the recommendations of the Emergency Committee, the WHO Director, General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, declared that the outbreak constitutes a public health emergency of international concern. World scientists studying COVID-19 then met at the World Health Organization's Geneva headquarters on 11 and 12 February 2020 to assess the current level of knowledge about the new virus, agree on critical research questions that need to be answered urgently, and to find ways to work together to accelerate and fund priority research to curb this outbreak and prepare for those in the future. The discussion led to an agreement on two main goals. The first was to accelerate innovative research to help contain the spread of the pandemic and facilitate care for those affected. The second was to support research priorities that contribute to global research platforms in hopes of learning from the current pandemic response to better prepare for the next unforeseen virus outbreak. Pfizer and German partner BioNTech have started testing a third dose of their COVID-19 vaccine to determine the immune response against new variants of the virus. The study is part of a clinical development strategy to determine the effectiveness of a third dose against evolving variants of the coronavirus. In the first stage of the study, a third 30 microgram dose will be administered to as many as 144 people who received the vaccine in the original phase. One safety trial.
The World Health Organization Emergency Chief, Mike Ryan, said that it should be possible to adapt COVID-19 vaccines quickly if they lose their effectiveness against mutations. During a social media question and answer session, Ryan said that there is no reason, even down the line, if this virus evolves to a point where our vaccines begin to lose effectiveness, that they can adapt those vaccines quickly.
Our top priority now is speeding up the production and delivery of vaccines and vaccinations across the European Union. And that's why we support the Commission's efforts to work with industry to identify bottlenecks, guarantee supply chains, and scale up production. And we want more predictability and transparency to ensure that pharmaceutical companies comply with their commitments.
Moreover, European Council President Charles Michel recently announced that the European Union agreed it should set up the production and delivery of COVID-19 vaccines. Following a video conference between EU leaders, Michel said that the Council supports the European Commission's efforts to work with industry to guarantee supply chains and scale up production. He added that the Council seeks more predictability and transparency to ensure that pharmaceutical companies comply with their commitments. The comment came after the Commission and EU countries have come under fire for missteps in their joint vaccination program and a stuttering rollout of shots that has lagged badly behind Britain and the United States. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the 27-member bloc is well on track to reach a target of having offered 70% of its adult population a COVID-19 vaccination by the end of the summer.
We are confident that we are able to reach our goal that at the end of the summer we will have offered to 70% of the population the vaccination, the adult population. These are 255 million people in the European Union, and if we look at the planned figures, this is a goal that we're confident we'll reach.
The former German defense minister also warned against COVID-19 fatigue among the European population and said the British variant was present in 26 of the EU's 27 countries, while the South African variant in 14 and Brazilian in 7 nations.
On February 27, Johnson & Johnson announced that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, FDA, has issued emergency use authorization for its single-dose COVID-19 vaccine. This decision was based on the totality of scientific evidence, including data from the Phase 3 Ensemble study that demonstrated the vaccine was 85% effective in preventing severe disease across all regions studied and showed protection against COVID-19 related hospitalization and death, beginning 28 days after vaccination. Johnson & Johnson is committed to making its COVID-19 vaccine available on a non-profit basis for emergency pandemic use. The company has begun shipping its COVID-19 vaccine and expects to deliver enough single-shot vaccines by the end of March to enable the full vaccination of more than 20 million people in the U.S. Johnson & Johnson also recently announced that rolling submissions for the single-dose COVID-19 vaccine candidate have been initiated in several countries worldwide. Efficacy is a crucial concept in vaccine trials, but it's also a tricky one. If a vaccine has an efficacy of 95%, that doesn't mean that 5% of people who receive that vaccine will get COVID-19. And just because one vaccine ends up with a higher efficacy estimate than another in trials doesn't necessarily mean it's superior. Efficacy can also change when scientists look at different outcomes. Johnson & Johnson's vaccine had an 85% efficacy rate against severe cases of COVID-19, for example. That's important to know because it means that the vaccine will prevent a lot of hospitalizations and deaths.
Johnson & Johnson's Chief Scientific Officer, Dr. Paul Stoffels, urged Americans to focus on vaccinating fast with whatever vaccine in an effort to slow the transmission of COVID-19 variants. Stoffels made his comments even as the first 4 million doses of Johnson & Johnson's one-dose vaccine were being loaded into trucks and shipped in the United States. Stoffels said he expected the company to have 20 million doses available by the end of March and 100 million by June.
It's very clear that all the vaccines are highly effective against severe disease, highly effective against protection for hospitals and death, for hospitalization and death, and therefore we should focus on vaccinating fast with whatever vaccine. The first doses, they come from a smaller plant which we could start up earlier, and that's our 4 million doses, which are already on trucks to the different places in the US, so they will be available. In later part of March, we'll be able to bring up to 20 million, and that will be, and then from then equally distributed over the next months, we'll bring up to 100 million before the end of June. So as we go forward in the next few weeks, we'll definitely make more concrete plans. But my focus and our focus was fully first on get the product done, approved, bringing it to the world, and now we'll make sure that we further upscale and work with partners around the world to bring it to as many as possible people.
Now that vaccine doses are being distributed, Stoffels said Johnson & Johnson's focus will now turn to upscaling production and working with global partners to be distributed throughout the world. He added that he was concerned about a recent study that showed the AstraZeneca vaccine offered only limited protection against the South African variant of COVID-19. He explained that the observations indicated that individuals infected with the original strain of the virus had no protection against the South African strain. Stoffels also said that Johnson & Johnson would have to consider changing its vaccine if evidence emerges that people who are vaccinated are getting severely sick.
It's very important people get vaccinated to get the transmission down as quickly as possible. It's because there's a lot of viral transmission and replication ongoing that viruses can emerge. And the faster we get it under control, the better we'll be able to be protected for future resurgence of the disease with a different variant. I think the evidence would be under vaccination, see people being infected and get severe sick again, get very sick again.
The U.S. government authorized Johnson & Johnson's single-dose COVID-19 vaccine recently, making it the third to be available in the country, following ones from Pfizer-BioNTech and Moderna. Both of those vaccines require 2 doses and need to be shipped frozen. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine can be shipped and stored at normal refrigerator temperatures.
Last year, the FDA set a goal for coronavirus vaccine trials. Each manufacturer would need to demonstrate that a vaccine had an efficacy of at least 50%. The confidence interval would have to reach down no lower than 30%. A vaccine that met that standard would offer the kind of protection found in flu vaccines and would therefore save many lives. So far, 3 vaccines made by Pfizer and BioNTech, Moderna and Johnson & Johnson have all been authorized in the United States after their trials demonstrated they surpassed the FDA's threshold. AstraZeneca and Novavax, which have ongoing U.S. trials, have published efficacy results from studies in other countries. Meanwhile, the makers of the Sputnik V vaccine have published results based on their trial in Russia. What's clear is that all 3 vaccines authorized in the United States greatly reduce the risk of getting COVID-19. What's more, all the vaccines have a high efficacy against more serious outcomes like hospitalization and death. For example, no one who got Johnson & Johnson's vaccine had to go to the hospital for a COVID-19 infection 28 days or more after getting their shot. A clinical trial is just the start of the research on any vaccine. Once it goes into widespread use, researchers follow its performance. Instead of efficacy, these scientists now measure effectiveness, how much the vaccine reduces the risk of a disease out in the real world, in millions of people rather than thousands. Early studies on the effectiveness of coronavirus vaccines are confirming that they provide strong protection. Kuwait began its COVID-19 vaccination campaign on December 24, 2020, with the campaign targeting citizens and residents, with centers ready to receive thousands daily. Kuwait joined other GCC countries that have started widespread inoculation drives, including the UAE and Saudi Arabia. His Highness Sheikh Sabah Al-Khalid Al-Hamad Al-Sabah, the Prime Minister, became the first person in the country to receive the COVID-19 vaccination, with many senior officials following suit and receiving their shots in the first week of the campaign.
The COVID-19 vaccination program kicked off in Kuwait on Thursday, December 24th, and Kuwait received 150,000 doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine on December 23rd. His Highness Sheikh Sabah Khalid Al-Hamad Al-Sabah, the Prime Minister, said that the Pfizer-BioNTech coronavirus vaccine was safe to use, and it was approved by several international bodies. His Highness the Prime Minister affirmed that the vaccination campaign would continue for several months in the country. He added that the vaccine had been administered to around 2.1 million people worldwide as a measure to curb the spread of the novel virus. His Highness the Prime Minister thanked specialized committees at the Cabinet and the Health Ministry for their tremendous efforts in the last 6 months, covering all aspects of the campaign. He urged the population to continue social distancing measures, wearing masks and washing hands to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Prior to his vaccination, His Highness the Prime Minister was briefed about the campaign's measures to safeguard the health of medical staff and citizens during the process.
Kuwaiti Director of Public Health Department Dr. Fahad Al-Gimlas said those who want to get the jab have to register their requests. The Minister of Health Sheikh Dr. Basil Al-Sabah affirmed that the elderly and frontline workers would be the first to receive the vaccine, while assuring citizens and residents that the ministry is keen on getting everyone vaccinated. 2 halls at the Kuwait International Fair are allocated for the vaccination program, as well as additional centers in the governorates of Al-Ahmadi and Al-Jahra.
The Ministry of Health launched 5 additional COVID-19 vaccination centers, bringing the total number to 15 centers, in addition to 2 halls at the Kuwait International Fairgrounds in Mishraf. The new vaccination locations are located in South Khaitan Health Center in the Farwaniya Health District, the Abdurrahman Al Zaid Health Center in the Hawali Health District, the Northwest Slabiqat Health Center in the Capital Health District, and the Sabah Al Ahmed Health Center in Al Ahmadi Health District, and Al Nahda Health Center in Al Jara Health District. The ministry launched vaccination centers at Al Masail Health Centers, Al Nasim Health Center, Mutab Ubaid Al Shlahi Health Centers, and Al Sadiq Health Center, Hamad Al Hmaydi and Sheikh Al Saydrawi Health Center. Vaccinations are also offered in Northern Ardiya Health Center, Salwa Specialist Center, Hamad Al Saleh Health Center, East Ahmadi Health Center, and Jabr Al Ahmed Center. Some 15 centers across Kuwait have been given the go-ahead to administer COVID-19 vaccines to citizens and residents. Kuwait's 5 health regions have been granted 3 health centers each, with work at Al Nasim and Al Masail centers. The other centers will include, in the capital region, Hamid Al Hmaydi, Sheikh Al Sidrawi, Msaad Hamid Al Saleh, and Northwest Slikhat. In the Hawli region, Abdurrahman Al Zaid, Al Siddiq, and Salwa specialists. In the Farwaniya region, متعب عبيد الشلاحي, العربية الشمالي, and خيطان الجنوبي. In Al Ahmadi region, Al Masail, Sabah Al Ahmed Health Center E, and East Al Ahmadi. In the Jahra region, Al Nasim, Jabr Al Ahmed Health Center 1, and Al Nahda. The official spokesperson for the Ministry of Health, Dr. Abdullah Sanad, pointed out that the ministry is already administering vaccines in centers for the care of the disabled and the elderly, and there are plans to launch other campaigns in some public and all sector establishments in the country.
The Ministry of Health has dedicated an online platform for people wanting to register to receive their vaccination. Official spokesman of the ministry, Dr. Abdullah Sanad, said that the new online registration service is available to the public via a link on the ministry's website. He said that early registration can help conduct the vaccination in an easy and orderly way, taking into account the numbers of citizens and foreign residents. The public vaccination campaign targets everybody and will be conducted in coordination with all competent state bodies.
الخطوة الأولى لتلقي تطعيم كوفيد-19 تبدأ بالتسجيل عبر الرابط الموجود في الموقع الرسمي لوزارة الصحة. بعد الإتمام تسجيل البيانات سوف تصل رسالة نصية عبر الهاتف، وفي هذه الرسالة موعد تطعيم الجرعة الأولى من لقاح كوفيد-19. وفي هذه الرسالة كذلك سوف يكون هناك QR كود رمز التحقق لاستخدامه عند الوصول. فور الوصول لمركز الكويت لتطعيم كوفيد-19 سوف تقوم بإبراز الرسالة النصية اللي وصلت لك واللي فيها موعد التطعيم حتى يتم التحقق من البيانات والتحقق من رمز QR كود، وبعد ذلك يتم توجيهك لغرفة التطعيم. بعد التحقق من البيانات والمعلومات عند الاستقبال ومن QR كود سوف يتم الإرشاد إلى غرفة التطعيم، يتواجد فيها عدد 2 من زملائنا من الهيئة التمريضية، واحد لأخذ البيانات والمعلومات من المراجع الكريم، والآخر هو لإعطاء جرعة التطعيم. بعد التطعيم هناك منطقة للاستراحة ولمدة 15 دقيقة. في هذا الأثناء سوف تصل رسالة عبر الهاتف فيها موعد وتاريخ الجرعة الثانية من تطعيم كوفيد-19. كذلك سوف يتم تزويدك برابط، في هذا الرابط سوف يتم توثيق أي أعراض جانبية لا قدر الله فيما لو طرأت، حتى يتم التواصل مع حضراتكم من قبل المختصين من وزارة الصحة. حاليا احنا في غرفة الملاحظة في مركز الكويت لتطعيم كوفيد-19. هذه الغرفة مجهزة بالأجهزة والأدوات اللازمة التي قد نحتاجها فيما لو دعت الحاجة لا قدر الله، وذلك لضمان تقديم أفضل الخدمات الطبية اللازمة وفق الجودة المطلوبة.
Yes, the COVID-19 pandemic changed most of our lives, not just in Kuwait, but all over the world. But thanks to science and the cooperation of various countries and organizations, vaccines have been produced and are being distributed. However, the production of a vaccine alone is not the end of the pandemic. People must register now to receive the vaccine and stop the spread of the virus. It is everyone's duty in every country in the world to get a COVID-19 vaccine so that we can overcome this pandemic together.